We've all heard about Alzheimer's, right? But what about its really confusing cousin, vascular cognitive impairment? For decades, just trying to diagnose it has been a huge headache for doctors all over the world. Well, a massive international effort has just created a single, unified rulebook. And today we're going to break down what that means for the future of brain health. So, just how big of a deal are we talking about here? Well, vascular dementia is the second most common type, right after Alzheimer's. It's the main diagnosis in about 15 to 20% of all cases. And that's a huge number all by itself. But is that the whole story? Not even close. As it turns out, the real impact of vascular disease on our brains is way, way bigger than that number suggests. Okay, get ready for this number. Cerebrovascular disease, which is really just a fancy term for any disease of the blood vessels supplying the brain, is a contributing factor to cognitive decline in up to 75% of all people with dementia. I mean, think about that for a second. Even when it's not the main cause, it's a major player in 3 out of every 4 cases. It's this massive, often hidden piece of the puzzle. And this brings us to the real heart of the problem, what we're calling dementia's confusing cousin. Despite being so incredibly important, any progress in research and treatment has been painfully slow. And the number one reason? There was just no single, clear, agreed-upon way to diagnose it. I mean, for decades, the whole field was just chaotic. This timeline, it shows just a handful of the different competing guidelines that doctors and researchers were all using at the same time. Imagine trying to run a global sport like soccer, but every country is using a completely different rulebook. That's exactly what was happening in brain health, and it made it almost impossible to compare research or give patients consistent care. And just to give you a taste of the confusion, look at this. This is such a basic disagreement. Some of the guidelines said you needed the person, or someone who knows them, to actually report a cognitive problem just to start the process. But others didn't. I mean, if you can't even agree on that first simple step, how on earth are you supposed to build a solid foundation for research? So, to fix this mess, the scientific community launched a huge quest for clarity. The mission was simple: assemble a global team to finally create one single standard that everyone, everywhere could use. And they did it. This number, 70, represents the international experts who were brought together for this one mission. And we're talking about people from a huge range of specialties: neurology, psychiatry, neuropsychology, you name it. And make no mistake, this was a truly global consensus. The panel had experts from Europe, North America, Asia, South America, and beyond. This was so important to make sure the final rules would actually work for clinicians and researchers all over the world. Okay, but how do you actually get 70 of the world's top experts to agree on something this complicated? Well, the answer is this really rigorous process called the Delphi method. This is how they actually forged the new criteria. You know, the Delphi method is actually a pretty fascinating way to build agreement. It's all about doing multiple rounds of anonymous surveys. And here's the key. After each round, the group's results are shared with everyone. Then the questions get tweaked based on that feedback, and then the experts vote again. You just keep repeating that process until a really strong consensus starts to form. And here's the really important part. This wasn't some simple majority vote. For any single point to make it into the new rulebook, it had to get at least 75% agreement from the experts. That is a really high bar, and it ensures that the final result is solid, reliable, and truly represents a global consensus. All right, so after all that hard work, what's actually new in the diagnosis? Let's take a look inside the new rulebook, which is officially called the VASCOG-2 WSO criteria. So the first big change sounds simple, but it is so profound. One name to rule them all. All the old confusing terms are gone. They've been replaced by this one single overarching term: vascular cognitive impairment and dementia, or VCID. This one name now covers the entire spectrum, from very mild issues all the way to major dementia. Okay, next up, the new rulebook brings some much-needed consistency to testing. It clearly defines 6 specific cognitive areas, or domains, that clinicians should be looking at. You've got attention and processing speed, executive function, learning and memory, language, perceptual motor function, and social cognition. By standardizing this, an evaluation done in one country can now be directly compared to an evaluation done in another. It's huge.
Another key update is that they've simplified how the condition is classified. They basically threw out all those old, confusing subtypes that nobody could agree on. In their place is a much simpler approach based on what's actually causing the problem. Is it ischemic, meaning it's caused by a blockage? Is it hemorrhagic, caused by a bleed? Or is it a mix of the two? That kind of clarity is a massive step forward.
And this is absolutely crucial. The new rules finally acknowledge that dementia is often a mixed bag. They now officially bring in biomarkers, those are biological signs of a disease, for other conditions like Alzheimer's. This helps doctors figure out when multiple diseases are happening at once and, most importantly, try to determine which one is the main driver of a person's symptoms.
And this next part, well, this might be the most revolutionary piece of the whole thing. It's a brand new category called preclinical or at-risk VCID. This is for people who have zero symptoms, but their brain scans show clear signs of vascular disease. The whole goal here is to identify people who are at high risk before the cognitive damage is done. This could be a total game changer, opening the door for real prevention studies and early intervention. So, okay, we've gone through a lot of details. Let's take a step back and ask the big question. Why does all this matter? Well, it's about creating a much clearer future for brain health.
It really boils down to this. By having one global standard, researchers from all over the world can now pool their data and actually work together effectively. That's going to lead to better, faster research. And better research, well, that ultimately means a better understanding, more accurate diagnoses, and most importantly, improved care for patients and their families everywhere.
The group that created these guidelines, they summed it up perfectly themselves. It's all about providing an international standard to create diagnostic consistency. It's a really powerful way to state the purpose and the incredible potential of this whole project.
So, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with this one big, hopeful question. With a unified rulebook finally in our hands, one that allows for better research and the potential to spot risk earlier than we ever have before, are we finally one step closer to not just treating, but actually preventing dementia?